The first thing I'll tell you is this. Nobody thinks a bike can start a war until it does. 3 sentences in. And that's the hook, because that's where this started. On a slow Saturday morning. 2 kids on a cracked asphalt cul-de-sac, wind in their hair, and somebody who decided rules were more important than people. My name's Jack Harper. I'm 42. I fix things for a living. I have 2 daughters who laugh too loud, and a wife who keeps the groceries from rolling into the storm drain. And I never imagined my neighborhood would become front-page gossip until the day Marlo Whitcomb stomped into our lives with a clipboard and a vendetta. Marlo was the kind of woman who polished her mailbox until the metal shone, who wore shoes worth more than my truck, who liked the sound of her own announcement at HOA meetings. She made order feel like righteousness. Her rule that summer was ridiculous on paper. No recreational bike riding in the common loop between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. She called it safety. She called it aesthetic. In the meeting, she used phrases like preservation of community character and liability concerns, and watch for the nods that let her know power still felt the same on everyone's face. The room hummed with sleepy agreement except for me. I remember my girls looking at me with those questions that have no filter. Dad, why can't we ride? I remember my wife Riley tapping her fork against her teeth like she was trying to count to 10 and get her thoughts in a line. You need to understand the small things to see the big picture. Marla's house sat on the highest spot on the street, big windows, neat hedges, a flagpole that was somehow always straight. She'd lost a lawsuit years before over a driveway easement. Rumor had it that the neighbor's fence cut a half-inch into her perfect lawn. She liked control because someone once took control from her, and she never forgave the world for that. So when my daughters Maya, 9, and June, 7, decided to ride around the cul-de-sac one afternoon, I thought, fine, a little rebellion is healthy. They pedaled, the sun caught their spokes, and for a minute the whole street felt like it had remembered summer. Then Marla appeared at the end of the drive like she'd been waiting for them to make a mistake. She walked fast, heels clicking, clipboard ready, eyes narrowed. Children, you know the rule, she said. And there was this clipped way she said children that made you feel like the word itself needed editing. Maya slowed, June's handlebars wobbled. Your mother asked us not to, I started, because I hate confrontation. Riley put a hand on my arm. I watched Marla's lips curl into something that wasn't a smile. It's not about your mother, she snapped. It's about everyone. She reached down, grabbed Maya's handlebars like she owned the bike, like she owned the street, and that's when everything in my chest went hot. Maya pulled back. Give me that, Marla hissed, and then I still hear it sometimes when the house is quiet. She slapped Maya across the face. Not a shove, not an argument, a slap. Time telescopes in the weirdest ways after that. For Maya, it was immediate, the little stunned breath, the hand to her cheek, the look that said, I didn't expect pain from a grown-up, and for me, it was something creaking into motion like an old truck finally finding low gear. All the petty complaints, the emails, the motions on meeting agendas, they suddenly had a body and a name. The neighbors came out. Mr. Llewellyn from 2 doors down, Mrs. Ortiz with the poodle, a young couple who had just moved, and their faces were a report card. People took phones out. Someone called 911. Marla wiped her hand on her skirt like she'd spilled a drink. I was only enforcing the rules, she said, voice trembling between indignation and performance. The police arrived, and for a long minute I just stood there, my heart trying to outrun my mouth. You rehearse things in your head, what to say, what not to say, and none of it fits the real thing. The officers asked questions that felt sharp and small, words like assault and witness floating in the air. Marla told the story like a practiced monologue, a woman who'd been provoked, a neighbor who'd been aggressive. Maya's voice came out thin but steady. She hit me. June clung to my leg and made an invisible question with her eyes. People who pressed record on their phones made a chorus of evidence that would be harder to deny. The public part of things, the police report, the DA's attention, the HOA's fakely neutral statements moved like a tide. The private pieces moved faster. Riley crying in the kitchen, me staying up until 3, replaying everything in my head to see if I could have done anything different. The neighborhood split, not in the dramatic way you see on TV. It was quieter, more corrosive. Some people called to sympathize. Others offered cold legalisms like procedures must be followed, which is often HOA speak for I don't want to pick a side. Marla had allies, too. A woman whose son had a scholarship to a private school and liked Marla's strictness. A man who'd once done business with the Whitcombs and still felt beholden. Power builds loyalists, even when power is petty. The courtroom scene wasn't a movie montage, it was long waits, rustling papers, testimony cut into neat, accountable parts. Marla's lawyer painted a portrait of a woman scared of liability, of a neighbor trying to keep property values intact. Our lawyer painted a different picture, a pattern, a motive, a history of weaponizing the HOA to punish those she deemed disorderly. Maya testified. She spoke about the bike and the wind and the slap her small voice carrying in that big, echoey room. You think kids break under pressure. Sometimes they do the opposite and become the most honest instruments in the room. What made people turn, more than the slap, more than the voice recordings, was the look on Marla's face when someone mentioned the driveway suit from years ago and a long line of petty infractions, the way rage thinly veiled itself as principle. It's easy to draw cartoons where the villain twirls a mustache and cackles. Real life is quieter. It's a woman who thinks order is the same as justice, who believes she's saving the neighborhood from itself, because in her mind, saving the neighborhood means saving a version of herself that was once threatened. That's the dangerous kind of conviction, righteous enough to lash out, polished enough to fool some people. We won in the sense that the court found Marla culpable, fines, community service, in order to attend anger management. The gavel landed and people exhaled like a storm had passed. But victory felt small, immediate, and unsatisfying in ways that surprised me. Marla's house stayed there, pristine and a little colder. She swung between defiance and apology, and I caught her once when she thought no one was looking, standing at her mailbox and turning her palms up like she was trying to measure something invisible. The neighborhood changed in subtler ways. Kids returned to the street, but for a while their laughter was tentative, like they were checking to see if joy had learned how to be dangerous. Some neighbors avoided us entirely, uncomfortable with siding or with the mess that truth brings. Others brought pies and jars of lemonade and told stories about the times they'd been on the wrong side of a rule. Riley and I learned to argue differently. We learned that silence buys venom, and that speaking up buys its own kind of wariness. I started organizing small meetings where people could say what they thought without being shouted down. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. There are things I lost: the illusion that civility is the same as safety, the naivete that big fences keep out small cruelties, and there are things I gained. An awareness that rules without mercy become weapons, a sense that community is an active verb, not a sign you nail to a post. Maya turned out to be braver than I expected. She learned to ride again, but she did it on her terms, with a little flair and a little defiance that made me laugh and ache at the same time. Here's the messy part. Not everybody agreed that justice was served. Some said the court overreached, that we had escalated something that could have been fixed with a handshake. Others said the opposite, that people like Marla only stop when consequences are real. The point is not that there's one correct view. The point is that communities are full of people with overlapping, sometimes conflicting truths, and the way we handle those truths defines what kind of place we live in. So why tell you all this? Because it's easy to look at a headline and decide you know the whole thing. It's harder to sit with the contradictions. The woman who polished her mailbox because she'd once had something taken, the father who wished he'd stepped forward sooner, the kids who wanted nothing more than to spin their wheels and feel the sun. If you watch this and you think, that's my neighborhood, then maybe it is. Maybe you've got your own Marla down the block, clipboard in hand, ready to enforce an idea of order that's really about control. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? If you lived next door to a person who wielded rules like a weapon, would you step in, or would you pretend not to notice because confrontation is messy? Tell me what justice looks like to you. Is it a court ruling, a public apology, community repair, or something else? Drop your thoughts below. Argue if you want, because that's what this is for. Not to say I was right and you were wrong, but to invite the messiness of opinion, to prod at what we think a neighborhood should be. If you like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear that small rules, when left unchecked, can become big harm. Leave a comment. Do you side with the family or with Marla? Have you ever seen a community heal after division? I read all of them, and I promise opinions welcome, nuance required.